Alright, welcome back to Operation Schultz. This is not a full turn, this is a bit of a housekeeping update. I made a few errors, one of which was fairly significant, and those changes might be relatively important, so just to make sure everything is all in order and everyone's on the same page, just going to go ahead and go through everything. Before we get into that, I did neglect, during the Soviet player's turn, Silk's turn, he was supposed to have collected an additional infantry in Central Mongolia for recruitment, so just make sure that's done. Also, if you were paying attention to the video I just put out, Shinsi was occupied by the Japanese there, which they shouldn't be, but the income was correct because at the time I did the income calculation, Shinsi was held, but I was still contesting Hong Kong, so the calculation was correct anyway, so nothing else needs to change. Alright. In Spain, I was not able to declare war on a neutral minor without 10 IPP in the bank, which I did not have because I spent it all in the production phase. I wouldn't have realized that mistake until I went to attempt to declare war and wasn't able to, so most of my combat moves still stand, excepting that at the end, none of the units actually walk into any nationalist Spanish territory. So the changes here are going to be the colonial infantry that disembarked from A44 is just going to be in Gibraltar instead. Same with the Anzac artillery that disembarked from M2. All of the units that walked into Eastern Andalusia from Gibraltar are going to stay in Gibraltar. The infantry that took Basque is just going to stay on board the naval transport as well. And then all of these units and territories are nationalist Spanish, not German. These territories in Africa, both of those units are able to disembark into French Morocco instead of into Spanish Morocco or into Rio de Oro. Okay. And then we'll need heavy cruiser, transport, mountain brigades, medium armor, and militia, and fighter. Fighter, medium armor, mountain brigade, militia, heavy cruiser, naval transport. Alright, that'll do. Alright. So that reverts all of Spain to its proper state. Good enough. That means this naval transport that was just hanging out can go in port as well. It didn't participate in amphibious assaults that it has to stay out, or that it has to go into if it wants to go in port. So it can go into any port that it wants to. Alright. And then lastly, one last thing. Because the British no longer have possession of Rio de Oro at the end of their turn, The French no longer have any interest in railing their infantry into French Sudan. It's going to have walked into Belgian Congo instead. Alright, that covers everything. I don't know if a unit recap is appropriate here. I'll recap all the changes at least, so if you followed the unit recap presented at the end of my previous video, you should have no trouble adjusting the state to the new one. This series of changes is relatively minor. Okay, Central Mongolia gained 1 neutral infantry. Shinsi is, and always was, CCP controlled, not Japanese. In Spain, the board state reverts to the beginning of last player turn, which means nationalist heavy cruiser and transport in port in Galicia and Leon, fighter in Madrid, 2 mountain brigades and a medium armor in Catalonia, militia in Balearic Islands, and that's all. Everything that was in Spain is pretty much in Gibraltar, with the exception of the 1 infantry that was in Basque is on his transport instead. I have not addressed, there's supposed to be an airborne that's alive too, and also the transport plane that landed in French Morocco is going to land in Gibraltar with the airborne as well. So we'll do a unit recap for Gibraltar because that's the messiest part. In port, I have 2 battleships, a light cruiser, a naval transport, and an Anzac naval transport. In the land zone, I have 1 militia, 3 infantry, an airborne, a colonial infantry, a mountain infantry, and an artillery, as well as a transport plane. Now in French Morocco, there is just the colonial infantry and the infantry that were in Morocco or Rio de Oro, and the transport plane isn't there anymore. And then the French infantry in Sudan is in Belgian Congo instead. That should cover it all. Apologies for the error. Everyone makes it. I'm sadder than anyone else is. Well, I guess Tactical's pretty sad too. Kind of messes up his plans to capture the stuff without any real penalty. Okay, so passing the board back off to Davik to be continued with the Italian turn. And best of luck.